What if I told you that a crime could literally have an expiration date? Well, in India, a huge change to the criminal justice system has introduced just that, a stopwatch on prosecution itself. Today, we're going to break down exactly what that means.
It's a wild thought, isn't it? Can a crime just, poof, expire? Well, under a new set of laws in India for a whole lot of offenses, the answer is, believe it or not, yes.
Okay, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We're going to walk through 5 key parts. First, we'll define what the starting line for a case even is. Then, we'll get into the new time limits, see how the clock can be paused, check out the exceptions, and finally, get to the big question: why does any of this matter?
All right, let's dive right in. Before you can even talk about a deadline, you gotta have a starting line. And in the legal world, the starting pistol for a case isn't the crime itself, or even the police report. It's a very specific moment in the courtroom. And that moment has a fancy legal name, cognizance. Just remember that word, because this is the big one, folks. This is the point when that legal clock, the one we're talking about today, officially starts ticking for the court. So, this brings us right to the heart of the new law. India's new criminal procedure code, the Bharatiya, Nagarik, Suraksha, Sanhita. Let's just call it the BNSS to keep things simple. Now puts a hard deadline on when a court can take cognizance for a lot of crimes. And check this out, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's a 3-tiered system. For really minor stuff, punishable only by a fine, the court has just 6 months to get the ball rolling. If the punishment is up to a year in prison, the deadline is 1 year. And for crimes that carry a sentence between 1 and 3 years, the court gets 3 years. But, and this is super important, for anything more serious than that, there's no time limit at all.
So you might be wondering, what happens if someone's accused of a bunch of different things at once? Well, the law keeps it really simple. The court just looks at the single most serious charge, and that punishment sets the justice clock for the entire case. Easy enough, right? Okay, so we've got the deadlines. But a clock isn't much good if you don't know when to start it, or if you can hit the pause button, right? Let's get into those details. And this is where things get really interesting, because the start time isn't always what you'd expect. It can change a lot depending on the situation. The law is actually pretty smart about this. The default start date is simple, the day the crime happened. But what if nobody even knew a crime was committed? Well, in that case, the clock only starts ticking the day the victim or the police find out. And here's another scenario. What if you know a crime happened, but you have no clue who did it? Again, the clock waits. It only starts when the offender's identity is finally discovered. So, can you pause the clock? Yes, you absolutely can. The system gets that sometimes delays happen that are totally out of the prosecution's control. In those specific cases, you can hit pause on the timer. And here are some of the big reasons the clock can be paused. You've got legal holdups, like a stay order from a higher court, or sometimes it's just bureaucracy, like waiting for the government to give the green light. And this is a huge one. If the accused person is on the run or has fled the country, yeah, the clock stops cold until they're found. All right, so we've covered the main rules for the clock. But the law also has a few, let's call them escape hatches. These are powerful exceptions for those really unique cases where a rigid deadline might actually get in the way of justice.
One of the most fascinating examples is the difference between a one-and-done crime and what's called a continuing offense. Think about it. A theft happens and it's over, but a crime like abduction is happening every single second it's ongoing. The law sees that, so for a continuing offense, the clock is basically resetting every single moment, giving a fresh deadline. And that leads us to what is basically the ultimate override button, the in case of emergency break glass option. It's a legal idea called condonation of delay. So here's how it works. Let's say the deadline has passed, the clock has run out. All is not lost. The prosecution can still go to the court and explain why they were late. If they've got a good reason, and if the judge agrees that hearing the case is essential for the interest of justice, then boom, the court can ignore the expired deadline and take the case anyway. Okay, so we've waded through a lot of rules, exceptions, and legal terms. Let's zoom out. What does this all actually mean for the average person, for the justice system as a whole? Why should you care about any of this? When you boil it all down, this whole justice clock thing is a massive balancing act. On one side, you're protecting regular people from having some old minor accusation just hanging over their heads forever, preventing it from being used to harass them. But on the other side, you want to make sure the police are investigating cases quickly while evidence is still good and memories are fresh. It's all about efficiency versus thoroughness.
So, there you have it. A stopwatch is now officially running on justice. The big question we're left with is, have they struck the right balance? Does putting this clock on the system really protect people and make things more efficient, or does it create a new risk? A risk that the truth might get lost simply because time ran out? That is the real test this new law is facing right now.